And we're
I'm glad we're live
live.
after 20 minutes of just silence.
What is the number that you guys see in the top left-hand corner of the screen right now?
Live 0, 10, 11, 12.
Okay, so mine says live 224.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as you start, it thinks that we've been live for minutes.
Yeah, it does that sometimes. Mine says 14 minutes, 17
Oh, we've been
seconds.
live this entire time.
No, we
Oh,
have
God.
not.
We haven't. It just does that. I've also thought
It's
that
just
too.
really silly.
It's just silly sometimes.
It's just so silly. That
It's
he's
it's
messing with
because
stuff.
last week Cam sent me the file that said episode 400 part 2.
That was so funny. He just named it wrong, and I was like, "What if you listen to it and it's us in the future?"
Did Cam for a second think he was recording episode 400 of the podcast just with you?
No, we
He
were
didn't
talking
know
about it.
what
We were talking
episode
about
it was.
episode 400. I think he just
He just wrote the wrong name.
He's just
Yeah,
silly
Jessica
little
wouldn't
boy.
shut up. It was the whole thing.
Oh, whatever.
Wow.
I thought this was a really good discussion, by the way.
I
You
was
guys,
seeing
It
it
was.
in
good
there.
episode.
Put a cap on the old Kaedu YouTube series.
Good series. I was a fan.
Just put cap on.
Put a little
Okay.
cap on.
We
it.
should,
I don't know
we
what we're
should
talking about.
start.
We should start.
What's are we just gonna like kind
No,
of
I
go
think-
round robin here and say like introduce our movies separately?
Mhm.
I mean,
we don't really usually have too much of a structure with the anniversary episodes. Like,
yeah, I think
we
Zach
just kind
usually
of go
just
around.
Yeah.
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 Zach, do you have like a nice sentimental like tidbit or something to say? You know, since it's 400, did you write a little
400
juicy
days
bit
of
for
summer.
us?
400 episodes of Cinematary.
400 episodes of Cinematary.
No.
Parentheses. 400.
When did we do the drunk ones? Was that 200?
That was
That
200.
was 200.
That was the best. I
So
know.
it's already double from there.
That was when
We
everyone.
wiped
Well,
them out.
I'm not
That's
gonna say that.
that's good math, Jessica.
Wow, thank you.
I was gonna make a joke, but I am not gonna
No,
make that
thank
joke
you.
on YouTube.
Be kind, please.
I'm being kind.
Oh, sorry. Kind is cool.
Kind is cool. Have you heard?
Is it kind of cool or kind is cool?
Kind.
Can you
is-
read? Use your eyeballs.
Yeah, Jessica has a hoodie that says kind of cool.
It's a
Kind
podcast,
is
not a book.
cool.
Why would he read?
Jessica,
Man.
that's not a book.
Wow.
Okay, we should actually record this episode.
It's
Yeah.
really good so far.
This is
so-
good content for
This is
YouTube
good. This is good
viewers.
content.
Oh,
just
but
quitting.
did we decide
And,
how we're gonna do the order?
I think
of it?
Zach's just cold calling
Zach's-
people.
yeah,
He's just gonna call on us.
Yeah.
So be paying.
be on your
attention.
Be
toes.
prepared.
Be like, boop, 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 boop. I'm gonna point to a thing. I'm gonna point to a thing.
Okay.
What do
yeah,
you
that-
want to
Oh,
game
man.
show?
More
that should-
content
that
just
should
for
work
the
completely
YouTube.
fine, I
Yeah.
guess.
I'm gonna pick. I'm gonna point to people and then point in my nose. All right. Here we go. In
Wait. What order are we introducing ourselves in? Or are we?
Zach is also cold calling us for that.
In this episode,
He's
we
gonna
have you,
point.
and you,
Just
and
point.
you.
He's like,
Why don't you do that? Let's point. Let's try it that way.
Are we all
Wow.
oriented in the
I
same
don't
way?
See how that.
Yeah,
That's
that
not
then
gonna help.
becomes kind of a game. Like,
It's-
can you do it? Can you respond fast enough?
that sounds awful.
Yes.
We're gonna go. We're gonna go Jessica and then Michael and then a Jess.
And a Jess.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, Jessica's getting impatient, so we gotta go, guys.
Uh-oh.
Mark.
She's on her way out.
Yeah,
I gotta
on our way
go.
out as a quitter.
Let's go.
Quitter. Patreon
Gosh.
exclusive. Jessica's quitting the podcast.
Oh my
Hold on.
god.
It's Patreon exclusive. You get to hear it like 3 seconds earlier.
That's right.
Hold on. There we go.
You better sell all your.
Why is there a
Cinematary
question
stuff before
mark?
it plummets.
Holy moly. She's like not even quitting the podcast.
Why is there a
She's
question
just
mark?
But is
gonna
she?
chill. She's taking on a
An advisory role.
yeah, a PRN.
That's
PRN. Podcast. Whatever.
Returning.
She's quilting
now,
now.
She's
too?
quilting.
How many hobbies does this lady
Ah.
have?
Okay, let's.
Well, she has room for one more now.
let's
Man.
This made Jesse laugh. All right, let's roll.
but Jessica loves these jokes. I think they should continue because she's loving them so much.
I think they should
They're
be
so
recorded.
funny.
This has been
Yeah,
a
we
spicy
should record
episode
those.
so far.
That's a good idea. Recording, that's a good one.
Damn. All right. Here we go. Roll fun one, Jessica is. In 3, 2, 1. And welcome to episode 400 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Jessica Carr.
Quiddy.
Michael O'Malley.
Andrew Swafford.
And Jess.
In today's episode, we're going to watch movies from long ago. No, I'm just
The long
kidding.
ago
Super
time
old
of
movies.
the late 20.
In
The
the
late
olden days of the late 2000s.
Back in the day of the 2010s.
I do have some like old man bygone era stories about this, the movie I'm talking about though. So
That sounds
What did
fun.
they call
The
like
yachts.
the first the aughts.
The aughts.
The late aughts.
Are all
Some
the
movies from the
today?
late aughts.
Around the turn of the century.
turn of the decade.
Fresh off of 9/11.
I
All right.
think all of these movies are a little bit cold on 9/11.
No, they are. My movie is 100% about 9/11.
Do you want to explain why we're doing this? What are we doing?
So what we're doing, we talked about it last week. If you listen to the whole episode like a true fan,
You all do, right?
we're talking about movies that were pivotal or that we really enjoyed back kind of when probably around the time of the podcast starting, when we were getting to be more critically thinking about movies as we were starting this podcast. Because I'll tell you one thing, not critically thinking good episodes at the beginning of this podcast. A lot of duds.
Yeah.
Do not recommend going back. But we're going to talk about some movies that I think we were high on, and we still might be high on. I don't know. We're going to see.
I think that we're all positive about all these movies still to one
Well,
extent.
don't spoil it.
But I
No,
think
sorry.
I think a lot of the discussion will be how our thinking about it, not necessarily positive or negative, but kind of how we assess the movie has changed. Because I think we tried to aim for movies that we were big on when the podcast started, but we haven't necessarily watched recently.
Yeah.
So we're gonna start it off with our most junior core member, and that's Jess. Just take it away. Lead us into
Hi,
this.
as somebody in the junior management.
Introduce your movie and why you picked it, and what it meant to you at that period of time.
Sure. So I think I maybe somewhat misunderstood the assignment. I thought I thought we were supposed to pick a movie that was kind of seminal to us, like, I don't know, kind of got us kickstarted on the maybe there's something to these movies.
No, that was the assignment.
That was the assignment. That's just
So-
a really weird way to describe it.
Yeah.
There's
Well, but you
something
said
about
when the
these movies.
you said when the podcast started.
That could be
and
the name of the episode. There's something
there's
about,
something about these movies.
Dot.
So I picked The Prestige by Christopher Nolan. When I like to think that I play a big behind the scenes role in Cinema Club and Cinematary.
It's true.
And let me tell you why. Because as a freshman in college, Christopher Nolan was my favorite director.
I stand here today, and it's the same thing.
It's definitely not true anymore. But like
That is every freshman in college's
Yeah,
favorite director.
I was
by the
very
way.
original and
High
cool.
schoolers too.
It's true.
I liked him a lot. I thought he was very clever and creative. And Andrew and I were together at the time, still are, obviously. And I had just started college, and I was walking on campus, and I saw Cinema Club. And Dylan was there, and this other guy. He's not important to the story. But they asked me who my favorite director was. And I said Christopher Nolan. And then I think about that. I'm like, man, these cool film guys probably thought I was so lame for saying Christopher Nolan. Is I feel like even Dylan was like, oh. Cool. But they got us going. And I mean, there were a lot of Cinema Club meetings that were just Andrew and Dylan there for a while. not a whole lot, but they kind of,
Yeah.
I wasn't really going as much, but Andrew was pretty dedicated, stayed afloat. It grew a little bit at a time. And
This is pretty deep Cinematary lore. I don't know how
Yeah.
many listeners know that Cinematary is birthed off of a college movie club, cinema club.
It's been 400 episodes, and we don't
yeah.
talk about it regularly, so I think you're fine talking about it.
Yeah.
right. So kind of came from a club and this journalist student who thought it might be cool to come interview a bunch of film nerds, and it just didn't stop. Anyway, so I picked The Prestige.
Didn't stop interviewing us.
Never stopped.
400 episods of interviews.
He just keeps doing it. Every week he calls us up, asks us to talk about
It's
some,
like, I got some
talk about
questions
some more
for you
fucking
people.
movies. He's like, I got another movie for you guys. Talk about it.
I got another one hot off the press.
And he just keeps coming. I don't know what to tell the guy. Anyway, so I really liked The Prestige, and I really liked Christopher Nolan when I first started getting into film because I don't know. I always thought one thing I really liked about him was kind of how he plays with time in films, and he likes to play with the non-linear storytelling structure in a way that, you know, obviously makes the movie sometimes a little bit more confusing as he's kind of like revealing pieces and stuff. That's especially so in this movie, but I think he plays with time in like Inception, and
We haven't watched Tenet yet. We should watch Tenet.
yeah, I haven't.
It.
Yeah.
Pretty much after, what did he do? Interstellar too. I kind of stopped following him after that.
Interstellar's
Yeah.
also good.
I didn't watch Dunkirk.
Because I think I was
Dunkirk
like,
is good too.
The man can make a good movie.
He can. I think that he makes really like crisp, fun, thrilling movies that you know, I don't know, they're original in how he makes them, and I think that he, you know, his production is very good. And I think that The Prestige is like a fun and interesting story. Like every time you're watching it, you know, even when you know the secrets, and it's not that hard.
Was it your favorite
figure out.
Christopher Nolan movie at
It
the time?
was, yeah. It probably still is.
What about it made it your favorite? Compared to like at this point in time, like the Dark Knight and Batman movies, and
there's those hard-hitting journalist questions.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think it kind of strikes the best balance of his kind of unique storytelling style, while also I don't know. I think that it's just like a pretty compelling story too, as opposed to, I mean, Batman is fun. I think the Batman movies are really well done, but I think that this is a really compelling story, and he does it in a fun way. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think that I think once you've kind of seen it, and once you've seen somebody kind of play out that, I don't know, like it, you know, maybe it's not as flashy and cool, or after you know the tricks, it's not as interesting. And I was reading some reviews on it earlier, and somebody pointed out like kind of how obvious some of the makeup is, and if you know to look for it, like, you know, especially seeing Christian Bale in like, what was the Cheney costume?
Oh, Vice.
Yeah. Since I've seen him in like some weird, funny costumes now, it's really super obvious to catch him in this. But at the time, I don't think he was doing a lot of that too. But
also, isn't that kind of like, so the whole thing with like a magic trick is if you know the thing, then the magic trick is stupid and easy to see. But the point of the magic trick is that you want to be fooled, and until you know how a magic trick is done, then like it's still captivating. I think that that's really a cool kind of meta thing about The Prestige, is how easily on rewatch like all of that is seated, and then like
yeah.
But at the time, like the first time you watch it, it feels like, wow, this is really twisty.
Yeah, exactly. Like the first time, you're just kind of like, wow, how cool, and then you understand and you know what to look for. But I feel like it doesn't really get like less good when you watch it. It just kind of changes what you're looking for, which is kind of interesting. Like this time, what really stood out to me was just, I don't know, just how kind of horrifying some of the things that they're doing, or how obsessive. I guess I never really paid attention to how truly obsessive both the men are about each other.
Like
And-
genociding like thousands of clones of himself.
Oh my God, yes. Or yeah, just the links that they got. Like he just ruins this man's life, and he stalks him, and I don't know. It's just yeah, I don't know. So, but I feel like when you first see it, you just kind of think it's like, wow, jazzy tricks, how fun! What a neat trick, a little fun movie for my mind and my brain, yay! But the more you watch it, I don't know, it kind of just does some different things for you.
Yeah, I feel like Christopher Nolan movies are really fun to watch exactly twice. Because the first time you're watching it, you're like trying to figure it out as the movie goes along. And then after it's over, you understand it and you want to rewatch it and like experience it kind of for the first time again.
Yeah.
Like actually get it this time. And then I think they're boring. Like after that, I don't want to rewatch. Like The Prestige is a movie that like I watched with my mom when it came out.
Oh.
And like we watched it and then immediately like rewound it and watched it again. Like that's the only movie I think I've ever done that with.
Yeah.
But like now I find it a little boring personally.
I thought it was fun. And I don't know, like I said, I think it kind of drew me to pay more attention to things like that. Like not only just like the story that's told, but the way a storyteller can tell it in an interesting way in movies. And so I think, it kind of got me started interested in watching movies that weren't told in like kind of ordinary ways. And I like that. Like I like when filmmakers play with time or space or I don't know, different kind of framing devices that aren't just so run of the mill.
I think that Pulp Fiction was that for a lot of people too.
And it was kind of, for me, it was kind of between those two, like maybe doing something with Tarantino or doing Christopher Nolan. But I guess like to me, this was more significant just because this is basically when I started kind of paying more attention to film really intentionally, was when I joined Cinema Club. And
we do have 3 directors on this lineup that are like the 3 directors that people get into when they get into movies.
That's true.
Nolan being one.
Like I said, I don't really keep up with his stuff anymore. But I think that I don't know. I'm not gonna like make fun of myself so much for liking him. I thought he was good at the time, and there's a lot more people I like a lot more now. But it was fun.
I think one thing this movie has over any of the other like film bro films that we're going to talk about in this podcast is David Bowie as Nikola Tesla.
True.
And
you had a surprise David Bowie.
A lot of people talk about like Labyrinth being like a kind of like, wow, like it's David Bowie, like kind of like young experience. And I didn't watch Labyrinth until I was in my mid-20s, but I saw this movie like when it first came out, and I remember thinking like, who is that man? And then later finding out it was like the same guy who it was like David Bowie, and that was like the last. Like,
wait, did you listen to David Bowie at the time?
I mean, I had heard songs, but I didn't connect it with the man on screen until later on. I looked it up, and so I think for a lot of people growing up with like Labyrinth, that was their like gateway into like recognizing that David Bowie was more than just like whatever changes.
Right.
That was that for me.
Yeah. Is there any, Jessy, are there any movies that are some of your favorites now that you watch that you feel like are kind of, they share elements, or how do you feel like you've evolved as a film appreciator?
That share elements with Christopher Nolan's style?
No, just in general. I changed my question halfway through.
Okay. Well, to answer that original question, I think, maybe like Paul Thomas Anderson is a good example of somebody who I really appreciate now for his kind of interesting methods of storytelling. Like we rewatched
he has a
The
structure
Master.
thing too.
Yeah, we rewatched The Master recently, and that really plays with time. Not so much with flashbacks so much, but also
it's like ellipses.
well, yeah, like just long spans of time will pass, and they never really indicate how much time, and you're kind of lost in it, and you really have no idea.
Yeah.
So, I think, like I said, I think that's still something that I appreciate and enjoy in film. Like it's kind of a fun treat for my brain. But what was the question that your question turned into?
It was, how has your taste changed since you
Evolved.
Yeah, originally got into Nolan, etc.
I don't know. I think right now the thing that I'm most drawn to in movies and in TV shows and anything is just, do I feel like the actor is really realizing their role and is really like creating a person out of this role, or do I feel like there's a distance there? I like that a lot, whether it's movies with romance in it or, just movies with really, really interesting, compelling, and realized characters, or intimacy in film. Like that's kind of what I'm most compelled by now is the acting methods, and how much I think brings that to life. And I
Do you
think
think
like
any of that's present in The Prestige?
I don't know. I think that they do a fine job, but I don't know that I'm like.
I don't
just
feel like
so
the
blown
characters
away.
are super believable.
Yeah, I don't. And like there's a part of my brain that's like shouting at the whole time, and I'm really, really sorry, and I'm not trying to alienate any listeners out there who are magicians, but there's a part of me.
They demand to be taken seriously.
There's a part of me that's like, man, these magicians are taking themselves so fucking seriously, like murdering each other over this shit. Like, y'all, like just pull a rabbit out of a hat and call it a day, man. You don't need to ruin your life over this shit.
Like one
So,
of the
like,
Sorry to all our magicians.
one
Oh,
of
trying
the
to get canceled by the
gateway.
magician community.
What'd you say?
Not trying to get canceled by the magician community.
I'm sure there are dozens of you out there, but
Dozens.
Hope one of them aren't our patrons right now.
oh
my
no.
gosh.
Well, anyway, it was the small part of my brain while I was watching this where I was like, I'm really, really trying to feel for y'all, but also you're magicians. Like,
No.
let's.
We could court the anti-magician crowd. It's probably bigger than the magician crowd.
That's true. No offense. Speaking of patrons, no offense to Jessica, Cam has some magician energy.
I can see that.
I will not follow up with a response.
Okay, good.
I'm
If
pro
you
magician,
love
though. I
or
think-
hate magicians, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes.
That would be pretty magical to our hearts.
I'm
I
just
think
saying,
magicians are great.
magician energy coming from him. Anyway,
It's
Anyway.
the mustache.
Is it magicians or is it illusionists?
Oh.
It's
Um,
Which one?
Well,
There's a
The
difference.
Illusionist was the other movie that came out the same year.
Yeah,
as
I watched
That
that
was the
too.
And
Can we talk about
Jack,
the weird confluence of battling magician
and it was
movies?
Also,
it
at the
was-
same year, there was that Lindsay Lohan movie called I Know Who Killed Me that I never watched, but the cover looks exactly
It does.
like
It's
The
fun.
Prestige. Like, they just straight up
Are there
copied
magicians
it.
in that movie?
I don't think so.
Well, then Hugh
Dang.
Jackman goes on like a decade later and makes The Greatest Showman, and I'm like, Hugh, you've already been a magician, buddy. Your time's gone. Like,
Wait,
Not a magician.
Greatest
he's
Showman
a-
is not
he's a-
about a magician.
Isn't it?
It's a circus guy.
He's
yeah.
a ringleader.
He's a ringleader.
And-
A circus guy, you know.
and also Cam,
Really didn't see
circus guy energy.
Oh my
Wow.
God.
Anyway.
Where is
Carney?
that?
How? I don't understand.
Anyway,
I
that's-
don't understand how.
Anyway, that's how Jess has become a more evolved
I
movie
think
watcher.
if you still like Chris Nolan, they're valid. I'll still love you. I understand.
And
I'm not like super into him anymore, but you go for it. You live your dreams, live your truth,
she's
and do your magic if you want. That's fine.
she's busy shitting on me.
Away from me, she says.
All right. Well, let's move on to another film, bro, and that is Momali, your movie. He's
Oh,
muted. He's
he-
muted from all his film. Bro.
Ah,
He's over there. He's over there like
Silence.
Well, he just left.
Michael O'Malley does this
Man,
podcast.
we thought only one person was leaving this
He's
podcast.
gone.
Yeah, he
This
just
is a good
Well-
intermission to let you guys know.
yeah, man.
No.
Like for the listeners, you can't see the video. I mean, he just left us.
He just left us. So anyway,
O'Malley
well,
is
since
having
it was
technical
Jess and junior
difficulties.
management, is Jessica also considered junior management?
No,
Do you-
Michael's back now. so.
Jessica's getting the gold watch.
Yeah, you guys can hear me, right? I actually
Yeah.
took the jack out of my my headphone jack out, and it not only stopped my Audacity recording, but also kicked me out of the audio for this.
I know. I'm sorry about all the magician comments.
That's
Michael. I
okay.
know that's why you really
Yeah,
left.
I left in the huff.
Yeah.
Disappearing act, you could say.
But is this the real Michael?
This is actually my
Oh,
clone.
shit. Oh no.
All right, Michael, it's your turn.
All right, it's me now. Okay, so the movie that I picked to rewatch is another budding film, like cinephile classic / insufferable film bro classic, which is Paul Thomas Anderson's
It's
There
my
Will Be
boy,
Blood.
Paul Thomas
Yeah.
Anderson.
And so my history with this movie, I'm
By
gonna
the
set
way,
the
can I
scene.
briefly cut in to say that this was the movie I was going to do, and Michael scooped it from me.
Andrew was gonna do two
Yeah.
of the picks.
Yeah.
Scoop.
Which just goes to show
He got
like
scooped.
people who are budding cinephiles should watch more movies than just the same
Yeah.
four.
But like,
everyone
I
watches.
think that the movies on our list, a lot of them were big movies for a lot of people. So like, it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting to go back to the era and see like what were the touchstone movies, not necessarily that have been like influential or lasting, but that like made an impact at the time among, I guess, a small community of like young people, right?
I agree, and I think that like our films that we've picked run the gamut. Like some of the ones I think were very big for people at the time and don't have a lot of staying power. I think The Prestige is kind of like a middle ground where like I think it has staying power by virtue of being connected with the guy who went on to do Batman.
Yeah.
And this one, There Will Be Blood, I think that this still has like a lot of prestige and clout. Like, and in some ways I should have been. I could have picked a riskier movie because this one I felt pretty confident in. This is still going to be good and something I like.
Was the riskier movie?
I don't know, a riskier movie might have been like, I don't know, picking Juno or something like that. Like if I could think about another movie I was really into at the time, but that his reputation has plummeted. You know,
I will say There Will Be Blood is the one Paul Thomas Anderson movie that I'm like, I've been least eager to revisit because I worry it will be that like
blood.
I'm here to tell you that it bangs. Like I'm here to tell everyone that don't be afraid. This movie
Be not afraid. Yes, there will be blood, but
there will be great movies in store. So I actually went back. So since high school, since about like when I was a sophomore in high school, I've been keeping a log of movies that I watched on this Word document. So in the
letterbox, do you still use it?
Yeah, I keep it as a backup. And so I went back and looked when I actually watched There Will Be Blood for the first time. And it was April of 2008. Although, for whatever reason, I put /?2008. So I don't know what day of April. But that is my log.
Lost to history.
But I can tell you
many of our episodes.
I can tell you the circumstances surrounding, and I've not seen this movie since 2008. Like this is the first time I'm seeing it. But again, I know it by reputation so much, and I've read a ton about it since. So it still felt pretty fresh in my mind, just because it's a movie that stayed in circulation, and Paul Thomas Anderson continues to be Paul Thomas Anderson. But so it was 2007. The awards fall of 2007, where all the prestigious movies started coming out, like No Country for Old Men, Juno, like 2007 was a pretty, in my mind at the time, and looking back on it, there's a lot of like notable movies from 2007. And I say this because I at the time would read the newspaper and our reviewer in the newspaper in Memphis, and I remember like taking note that he gave this movie called There Will Be Blood 4 stars, which was like his highest rating. And I remember reading about it and I'm being like, wow, this sounds really cool.
The fact that we're talking about a local newspaper.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Is
I can't
also
remember if
very
I said
2007.
I can't remember if I said this on air or before we started recording, but my story with this movie is full of like old man, like bygone era factoids. And so like one is
I pulled up my Word document and I wrote down.
This is very cute. You were like a little kid.
It's not even a
You're reading
like it was
a newspaper.
.doc. And then so I read about it in the local paper and I looked, and the nice thing about a local paper is it only reviews things that are playing in your area. But the Memphis area is huge, and I was living in a suburb of Memphis called Collierville, and they have one movie theater in Collierville that's a multiplex, and that usually eventually gets award seasons movies, but only once they're nominated for awards. So like surrounding the Academy Awards, you would sometimes see these in the movie theater, but it wasn't even guaranteed that you would. And so I remember seeing this, and it was playing like in Memphis at like the like art house theater or whatever there, and I was like, man, I'm not gonna be able to do that because did I have a driver's license at the time? I probably did, but I probably wouldn't have driven into town. So anyway, I saw that, and I knew I had to wait until it came out on DVD so I could go to Blockbuster and get it.
Oh yeah, bro.
That is also
And-
how I watched this
Blockbuster.
movie. It was a
Yeah, so I guess by April of 2008, it had come out on DVD, and I got at Blockbuster. And my mom, I had to talk my mom into watching it with me because my mom wanted to get something else at Blockbuster, and I had to like be like, "No, mom, you gotta get this movie so that we can watch this. I've heard it's great." And
I
had to-
talked my dad into watching it with me too.
Yeah, and I had
another just piece of evidence in like you and me are the same person.
Well, the next part, I'm curious to see if you did this too.
Okay, we'll see.
Some of you may know, but probably most of you don't, because there's no reason to know this unless you have the very specific upbringing that I have. But some of you may know that Focus on the Family is a like a Christian media titan, and
Where are we going?
they published. I think this website is still live, but it used to be a magazine as well. They used to publish this magazine called Plugged In, which marketed itself as like, this is how parents know what media is out there and how to be careful that their kids don't get the wrong media or whatever. And so they would have movies where they would like do content breakdowns, kind of like if you're familiar with like Common Sense Media, except that a Christian kind of slant to it. So like, if God's name was used in vain, that was a big deal. Or like if whatever, there are anti-Christian messages. And
We love the Conjuring movies, by the way, because they're
Plugged In?
very pro-Jesus. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I've not read Plugged In a very long time.
I don't know about Plugged In. Focused on the Family. Yeah, I know has like put out a positive review of The Conjuring. Yeah.
Wow. I've not kept up with Focus on the Family and Dr. James Dobson in a minute.
Dr. James.
But
Man, you're really diving into stuff.
This movie being rated R, I had to really like convince my mom, and at the time I was old enough to get R-rated movies and all that. I was 17, I guess.
The title is a
2007?
warning. The title is
Probably
like
blood, and there's not a ton of blood. Like honestly, like this is
Not a lot.
No,
This
I mean,
is
there's
a-
some, but
I think in another world that is not very different from ours, this would have been a PG-13 movie, and I think the only thing that makes it R-rated is the fact that there is in fact blood shown on the screen, like flowing from a person at the end of the movie.
I
But
think it
otherwise,
also might just be because the movie's so intense in like an adult way.
it
like
could be.
But I mean, that's stupid because like 2001 is rated G.
Well, that was a different thing in
That is true.
But at any rate, so I had to talk my mom into seeing this movie. I did it by pulling up Common Sense Media on our like home desktop, and we had dial-up at the time, and so we had to like connect to the internet.
Nobody
rock
could
and roll.
use the phone.
Yeah, no one could call us at the time. I had my mom hostage. She couldn't call in for friends. And anyway, long story short, I watched this with my mom, and my mom was very like nonplussed at the movie. Like she was just like, "Oh, okay." But I remember watching this.
Finished.
those boys.
And just being captivated. And the very specific reason that it captivated me at the time was I was in AP English, and I remember thinking, this feels like the books that I'm reading in AP English. And by that, I meant like it had all these literary flourishes. And like, for instance, Paul Dano plays two different characters, which is something I didn't actually remember until this movie. I rewatched it this time. But like, there's one scene at the beginning of the movie in which Paul Dano plays a guy named Paul, and then the rest of the movie you see his twin brother Eli, and so there's like these like kind of mirroring things. And I remember thinking like, oh, I remember my English teacher talking about like foils and like there being mirrored characters and stuff like that. Oh, that's cool. That's like in this, and there's of course like all this symbolism. There's
English
like the kind
teachers changing lives.
There's like the random like the kind of random left turns this movie takes, like when the Daniel Day-Lewis's character, like his brother shows up, or a guy claiming to be his brother, but it turns out it's not him, and that's just like a little detour that the movie takes. Like it feels very much like reading a literary novel or something. And I remember being captivated. I was like, I didn't know movies would be like this, and I didn't know that like the things that I'm doing in English could also be done to movies, and that set me down the path that I'm currently on, in which I'm still insufferable about.
So was that like the first like artsy movie that you watched?
It might have been.
Wow. I mean, you were at the point where you were like reading the local movie critic and taking note of what got 4 stars. So like,
yeah,
there was something before that.
I mean, our local film critic was fairly middle brow, and I mean, like, There Will Be Blood on revisiting is not really an art film in like the sense of a lot
Sure.
of them, right? Like, it is still telling a coherent story or whatever, but it has like more of these literary flourishes and more of the like kind of artsy flourishes than I was used to. I'd have to go back and look, but 2001 was another really early one, and that one completely befuddled me when I first saw it.
Yeah.
And I didn't really like that one. So I don't know. I mean, I watched a lot of movies growing up, but a lot of them were like the movies you would normally watch, like Disney movies or something. Or like my parents were really big into like old, like classic Hollywood movies. And I watched a ton of those growing up too. And none of those are particularly like art film kind of movies. And
Right.
I think maybe the following summer, like the summer after my senior year, and I'm not sure why this was the case, but my dad all of a sudden was like, I'm going to show my boys all the movies I liked when I was growing up. So we watched The Godfather and Alien and stuff like that. And like those, like by that time, like I recognized the format of those as like kind of like prestigious kind of movies like There Will Be Blood. But I hadn't seen those when I watched There Will Be Blood. So, but yeah, there was a real turning point, like a real like inflection point in how I viewed movies. And I haven't returned to it since. And I returned to it a few days ago. And this movie rocks. Like one of the things that I remember thinking about the movie when I first saw it was that it was slow paced. And I think now, because I'm so much used to different kinds of movies, like this movie felt like just a wild ride. Like,
it's not like Tarkovsky.
It's not like Tarkovsky. It's not as wild as some other ones though. Like, Magnolia or something. Like other Paul Thomas Anderson movies, like are much more fast paced and wild. But like, I remember I was watching this, and this movie is like 2 hours and 40 minutes. It's a long movie, even for Paul Thomas Anderson. And I remember about to rewatch it. I'm like, boy, I'm going to be sitting here for a while. But
he's
man,
kind of like keyed into a different rhythm now, like post Boogie Nights Magnolia, where like the movies can be really long, but they still feel really tense.
This like, is the movie that's like the. I remember I went back and looked at a bunch of contemporary reviews of this. And this is the movie that at the time people realized, oh, he's changing gears here. And like, of course, Paul Thomas Anderson made good movies before this, and people liked his movies before this. But this was the one a lot of people, and this is something I picked up on when I rewatched it that I wouldn't have been able to at the time. But a lot of people clue in on like the 2001 references at the beginning of the movie, which like are very heavy. A lot of people, he's like batting for the big leagues, right? Like this is like him trying to make like a capital G great movie, whereas like a lot of the previous Paul Thomas Anderson movies were very like young man energy kind of movies where they're energetic and that's like their power. But this is one where is the gestures are so big. One thing I totally forgot is that the preacher character played by Paul Dano, his last name is Sunday, which is just like one of the most ridiculous like. There's just a lot of ridiculous things where he's just going like, I'm going to give you like capital S symbolism, capital G great movie. I'm going to have this long shot of this like flame, coming out of the oil well, and it's going to be a symbol for capitalism, and you'll know it. Like it's the movie, and like that would be insufferable, and maybe is insufferable for some people. It would be insufferable if the movie itself wasn't just so entertaining, just moment by moment. I just was captivated. I maybe even like it better now than I liked it at the time, even if it's not as mind blowing. But I just like every moment of this movie, you're just filled with. It's just exciting, intense, and of course you've got like Daniel Day-Lewis like totally chewing up scenery, but like everyone around him is like great too. Paul Dano is really odd in this movie, as Paul Dano can sometimes be, but he's like really good in this movie for like the kind of like. Weirdly intense preacher, like early charismatic, early.
Well, that was the star-making Paul Dano role, right? I don't think he was.
He was in Loma Sunshine.
Loma Sunshine.
Oh, that's right. Never mind.
But this was like grown-up Paul Dano role. This maybe like what pivoted him toward like
the Riddler.
Other Paul Dano. The Riddler. That's I was going to say that, but yeah. But yeah, I thought this movie was still very good. To anticipate any questions from Zach, like in terms of like how my thoughts have changed about the movie, like it seems a much less like singular object than when I first saw it. Like I can see the influences and I can see the ways in which oh, there's other movies that do these same sorts of things as this. Like this doesn't feel like this kind of like monolithic, like, wow, I've never seen anything like this before sort of thing now, which I think is just that's just part of like seeing more movies, I guess. I otherwise feel very positively about it, like as positively as I ever have. I was talking with Andrew a few days ago. We were texting about Paul Thomas Anderson, and before this, I was thinking like, I'm not sure Phantom Thread might be my favorite movie of his.
Man,
But after
it's
returning
good,
to
though.
this, I think this is still it.
Shoot.
Oh
This is
man.
still number one PTA for me.
Though that's a really hard competition. Like I feel like you could pick almost any of them and be right.
In some way, it's hard. Like most of his recent movies have been like really top tier, but in another way, watching this, like none of his recent movies go for spectacle like this movie does, and I think that pushes it. Like it's the grandeur that's on display in this movie is really incredible, and I think that in the way that it uses that grandeur like is really interesting and compelling. Also, this was another pivot in this movie is Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead,
Yes.
like his breakthrough. He had done I think
The
one film
Arrival.
score before this,
Yeah.
but this is kind of his beginning of his work with Paul Thomas Anderson. This is also like him pivoting from like the guitarist of Radiohead, a band that I'd listened to some at the time, but I don't think I knew at the time that he had scored this movie. And now he's like, at least as well known for his scores as he is for his role in Radiohead.
And is like easily among the best composers, like film composers working right now.
Yeah. And There Will Be Blood is an incredible score. Like that was one of the things too. I was thinking like, is this score going to feel like just kind of a proto like what he would go on to do? Now that I know the rest of his composer career, and no, like this score rocks. Like it's a great score.
The like percussion number that happens during the like oil well catching on fire scene is incredible.
Yeah, it's great. And also he has these like kind of like classical flourishes, like more traditional classical flourishes as well throughout the movie, like the ending scene, where he like whacks the guy with the bowling pin and it's the end.
He just whacks him.
And then it just like smash cuts to the credits and like this like music piece that's like not like the rest of the score at all is playing, and it like feels like a 18th century like classical era kind of thing, and that's really good too. It shows a lot of range and maybe like is a good like anticipation of like Phantom Thread or something like that. But yeah, There Will Be Blood, good movie.
Since you're anticipating questions, how do you feel that you've evolved as a movie watcher?
I mean, I think I've gotten more patient. I think one of the things that is a really difficult hill to pass or Rubicon to cross for a lot of people, and certainly was for me, is the change of pace of movies, like when you get into like art films, and not just like in terms of like how fast the like editing is and how fast how conventionally exciting it is, but also just like the way in which information is communicated, where you might see something visually and they will never underline that information with a line in the script. You'll see something visually and you're supposed to maintain that in your memory rather than, I think I saw that, and later on they'll say, hey, I just saw this thing happen, and you're like, oh yeah, that I was supposed to remember that, right? Like a movie like this and like a lot of art movies like expect you to be watching the screen not just for illustrating the story, but for communicating information about things that otherwise you wouldn't know. And I think that a lot of people, myself included at the time, aren't trained to watch movies in that way. Like the stuff that happens on screen is cool, but that's not where you're getting the plot necessarily. If you wait for dialogue to explain what's happening, to underline what's cool about the movie. And
well, there's like a reason that we expect like English class to be a thing that where we like train kids how to do that with books. right?
Yeah.
Because it's not people's like default setting of like taking in stories, right? But then we don't teach them with movies, which is weird considering it's the dominant art form, like that in TV, right?
I think also another thing too is I found like a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson's recent movies to be really funny, including something like Phantom Thread or even like The Master. But those movies don't have the tone of a funny movie. And I remember first seeing There Will Be Blood and thinking like, boy, this is a big boy serious movie. And it kind of is, you know, like it's trying to be that kind of movie, but it's also really funny. Like in the ways that like more recent Paul Thomas Anderson movies are funny. Like just the lines are just like cranked a little bit to the absurd, and the performances are really funny. And like so the ability to laugh at a movie that's not presenting itself as a comedy, but also like not laughing at a movie like, ha, it's so bad it's good. Like that's a different way that I'm viewing movies than when I was younger as well.
All right. Jessica,
What?
it's your turn.
Okay.
Quitter.
Is it really my turn?
Yeah.
I thought that we would be going into a part 2 for some reason.
No, part 2's for
Senior
people. You know?
Oh my gosh.
senior management.
You had to have been in the conference room, awkwardly talking about Inside Llewyn Davis. At the end of part 2.
Oh my gosh.
We do not actually have a senior, junior hierarchy here.
Oh, we do.
We're
and
making-
it's all men.
You
My
know,
voice only.
it's only been 7 years of my life dedicated to this thing, so it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, now you're quitting.
Well.
Wait, did we say that at the beginning of the episode, or are we saving it?
Yeah, Jessica's
Move on,
quitting.
move right along. She's not even quitting.
Okay, so I have decided
Oh my
I've decided to leave the core of Cinematary, which only means that I am not going to be directly involved in lots of like the executive decisions, and also I'm not going to be on as frequently. But I still am going to be on the podcast, and I will still participate. I have a growing business that I am trying to continue to grow, and I have other projects that I would like to be a part of. And so I'm kind of like going ahead and being like, I'm gonna, go ahead and leave the core so that I am not taking up too much time where other people would want to commit their time better than I can. And so I'm gonna go ahead and jump off the ship before it just steers in the wrong direction and
Jumping off the
it
ship
makes
big
Wait. Does that mean like we're going in the wrong direction, or
That's
I'm
right.
con-
That's
that's
right.
a
We're
bit
going the wrong
Yeah.
direction. She's
Yep.
drowning
Yep.
instead of going
She's
the wrong
getting a
direction with us.
lifeboat.
Yeah.
Wow.
yeah, I'm
Away
confused by the
from
metaphor. I'll be honest.
Okay, whatever. It was
I
a
thought
bad
that for a
metaphor.
while,
I
So
want to know
speaking
why
of
we're crashing, but anyway, go on.
speaking of breaking up with people,
Oh,
I
wow.
watched 500 Days of Summer.
The segue.
That was nice.
That's the
Dang.
veteran podcaster energy right there.
Yeah, too bad she's quitting.
Speaking of,
Man, we should really think about promoting her to senior manager.
wow.
Too bad it's only men.
We gotta.
Oh my god.
God.
All right, Jessica, go ahead.
So I watched 500 Days of Summer. I chose this movie because it is a film that I've actually seen probably like 5 or 6 times, and
What you gonna say about
It's good.
like I would rewatch it whenever I was like feeling kind of, I don't want to say feeling like sad, but it's not a very like upbeat movie, but I would take some sort of comfort in the movie for some reason, and I would just like rewatch it. And the last time I saw this movie was in 2015, so actually 7 years ago, which is also the year that I joined the podcast, so that is pretty cool coincidence.
Crazy.
But I I remember from this movie that it was pretty much like it was kind of like an anti-rom-com type of thing where a lot of people were talking about like how much of a bummer it was. And the discourse has become like, since this movie has aged, kind of like people placing blame on the Summer character. And I think that it's interesting when you rewatch it because, like, when I first saw this movie, like, this movie came out in 2009, so I was like a freshman in high school, and I probably watched it like when I was in high school. And when you first watch the movie, you're kind of like exclusively on Tom's side, or at least I was, because Tom is like this guy who is a hopeless romantic. It's played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and he loves the Smiths, and he loves drawing like architecture, and he just
Like boys do.
he romanticizes about the ideal partner. So he
Yes.
has this idea in his head of what the perfect woman for him would be. And he all of a sudden, like, whenever he meets Summer, he is like, they're in an elevator together, and he is listening to the Smiths, and she hears it and starts singing the lyrics.
Yes.
He's like,
And
I love the
he-
Smiths, and then walks out, and he's like,
I love Smiths, and then it's like ding, like it's just all of a sudden like ding. Okay, this is the person for me. Like he's like, this is the love of my life. I have to do everything I possibly can to get her.
Is this
And-
like the Manic Pixie Dream Girl?
No,
Or
because
is-
you have like a very similar thing happens with Natalie Portman and
Oh,
Zach
you're right.
in Garden
State.
State,
Garden State. Yeah.
but I think it's the Shins.
Yeah, so, and I honestly think that the movie is like trying to dispel some of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl stuff. I don't think that it like successfully does it all the way, because they're like we're absolutely getting the story from Tom's perspective. And so I would be very interested in seeing a movie version of it where we're actually only getting like Summer's perspective. Because I think the movie kind of sets itself up to be like trying to do that. So it starts with footage of both of them when they're children, and it like says lots of like, this is what Summer likes, these are her dislikes, and it kind of does the thing in like Amelie where it has like a narrator who is like telling you all these things that people like and what people dislike. And it seems like it is like breaking down both of the characters, because we're gonna get to know both of them. And then as the movie goes on, you're pretty much only getting Tom's perspective. You're getting like her rejecting him and her leading him on and her doing all of these things. And so I think when you first watch the movie, you identify more with Tom because or for at least for me, like I was, in high school, pretty immature. And I was saying like, well, why is this girl treating him like this? Why is she like, he just cares about her because she likes all the same things that he does. So why is she like dumping on him so bad? And you kind of like go through the movie of being like, well, like Summer's kind of an awful person and he should just move on with his life, and that's that. And then as you mature and as you rewatch the movie, it's very obvious in the film that there are several characters that are spelling out like how awful Tom is. Like they're calling him out on things that he is saying that are inappropriate or sexist or what have you. And like he would be like, she doesn't even say anything to him. He like runs into her at work, and this is when he first is interested in her, but she's not really giving him anything in return. And they run into each other, and he asks her like how her weekend was, and she says it was good.
It was good.
It was good. And then he goes, oh, that dumb bitch. Like, why did she say that to me? She was just saying that she had a good weekend because she fucked a bunch of dudes, and that's why her weekend was great. Like, fuck this girl.
Shit, I do not remember this element of the movie.
Yeah, and
Do you
then
remember? Can I ask you something, Jessica?
yes.
Am I remembering right? The beginning of the movie starts with like a little like a title card or something like that. I'm trying to remember what the title card was saying. Like the events of this movie are not based on real life, except for
Yeah.
you bitch, or something like.
Yeah,
Doesn't it
yeah,
start
yeah.
with-
Oh my
It
god!
was like, except for you bitch, and it was like it like named a woman. It was like Jenny Beckman or something.
Yeah, I always thought that was kind of weird.
So is this actually like an autobiographical thing for the guy who made it?
I don't know, but like my thing is that there are so many characters that are put into this movie, including Chloe Grace Moretz, who plays his little sister, and she is like a little girl, but she talks like she's like a 50-year-old woman. Like, she's the one who is giving him all of the wise advice and like telling him, like, whenever you look back on your relationship with Summer, you're only thinking about the good things. You're not thinking about any of the bad things that were going on. And she's the one that is like giving him like the words of wisdom or whatever. But she tells him at the beginning explicitly, like, she says, I'm not looking for anything serious. This is not a relationship. I'm telling you right now, before anything starts happening, that we are not a thing. Like, I'm telling you that I don't want to be with anyone. And there's a scene when they do karaoke at a bar, and it's JGL and then his coworker, and the coworker asks her, are you dating anybody? And she says no. And he was like, why? Like, do you just not like men? What's wrong with you? And she's like, I want to be independent. I want to be an independent person. I don't want anyone tied to me in that way. I'm young. I just want to have fun. And he goes, oh, so you're a dude. You're a dude, right? And so it's just like all of the gender politics in the movie are kind of like mix matched, and I think it's interesting, like, as you watch it as the years go by, where your perspective kind of shifts and you are not so much Tom anymore, and you kind of become more like Summer, where you're like, okay, this person just wanted to have like choice, like she just wanted to be able to choose who she was with. And then towards the end of the movie, she delivers the gut punch speech to him while they're sitting on the bench, where she says, like, because in his eyes, she gets married very quickly to a man after she says, oh, I want to be independent, I don't want anybody. And so he's like this fickle bitch, like, she just lied to me this entire time. And she says to him, the reason why I married him was because I saw something in him that I didn't in you, and I all of a sudden woke up one morning and I was sure. And he is just like, I mean, in tears, like, he's just like, well, geez. And it's kind of just like she was telling him the truth. Like, she didn't feel that way about him, and she was like very specific about how she felt, and he just kind of ignored her because he had this idealized woman in his head that he wanted to be with, and he just like kept going for it, even though she gave him all the signals of like, this is not a thing that you should pursue anymore. And I don't know. So like all of that stuff was interesting. I thought the movie handled it really well in the way that it portrayed Summer's character. But it is interesting that if you watch it like multiple times and later on, that your perspective like kind of shifts. So I don't know if that was intentional on the part of the director.
I feel like that's probably a 2007, like making a movie in 2007 from like 2007 guy brain,
Mhm.
you know, and then like seeing that age badly over time. That's my guess.
What do you mean?
Like, I just imagine like the gender politics of a lot of older rom-coms are like not the best, right? And I feel like that era was like maybe I don't know. It was like feminism being kind of like a pop thing, like
I
it
feel
being
like I've
cool
heard
to be
Joseph
feminist.
Gordon-Levitt like go on record and say like the intention of it was never really.
Yeah.
I mean, like you are supposed to be seeing her as not like the evil bad guy if you, like you're paying attention to the movie. I feel like I've heard him do interviews about that or something.
Yeah,
It's been a long time since I saw this, but I do kind of remember that the movie is. So there's another movie that I watched around the same time as when I first saw this, which was Annie Hall,
Yeah.
which Woody Allen, whatever,
Very
asterisks,
similar.
like etc. But
Yeah.
like Annie Hall, the movie is at first what seems like a movie about heartbreak and like this woman left me and like whatever, but ultimately becomes a movie about like growing up and learning how to make peace with the fact that someone wasn't right for you. And I think that this movie, I remember thinking, is doing the same thing.
Doesn't
And
this directly reference Annie Hall? Is this the one that directly
There's
references?
the expectations reality thing.
it's
No.
the
I think it takes a lot from
Graduate.
Annie
The
Hall.
Graduate is also referenced in
The
this movie a lot.
Graduate. That's it.
It's the Graduate, yeah. And that was the other thing, is that I think that this movie was like a big one for lots of like budding cinephiles because it references a lot of movies in it. Like there is the Graduate reference where they go to the movies and they watch the ending of it. And it's the scene of Dustin Hoffman like in the like whenever he gets married and he's like, oh shit. And Summer looks at him and it kind of clicks for her and she's like, I'm not supposed to be with this person. And she ends up breaking up with him later that day after they watch that movie. And then after they're broken up, JGL goes to a theater by himself and he falls asleep and he starts seeing all of these like black and white like French New Wave references.
Yeah. Well, it's like the movie is like full of these like really obvious technical flourishes that are pulled from other movies, but people in like the target age range watching it when it came out didn't actually know the references. Right. This is also true for like Tarantino, right? Tarantino was like all over. Yeah, like here's all this like film technique that like teenagers watch and they're like, this movie changed the fucking game. Like I've never seen a movie do shit like this, but they don't realize that it's actually just stealing.
Yeah, exactly. And like one of the most iconic scenes in this movie, I think, is whenever they have sex for the first time.
Yeah, the Hall & Oates.
Yeah. And he like walks outside and then just everybody, he starts doing a dance number and everyone joins in with him. And he like gets a baseball and knocks a ball out of the park.
I love that scene though.
And
it is a good scene.
It was very good.
He sees like Han Solo in the reflection in the car window or something.
Yeah.
And it was also like the soundtrack for this movie is also very good.
One of my faves. I love like every song on that soundtrack. I was so obsessed with it when it came out.
Regina Spektor in it, the Smiths, etc. Like it's very, very good.
I was even into that like one French song that's like only in it for half a second.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you got any questions for me, Zach? Are we at that part of the thing?
Jessy, I know this was a big one for you also. Do you have anything you want to add?
I don't know. Yeah, it was definitely a favorite of mine. And again, kind of like plays with time and how it tells the story, kind of jumping back and forth and stuff. So I think that's something I liked about it. I think it was a neat way to. What year did this come out?
2009.
I think it. I don't know if like Andrew and I were together when I saw this or not, but I think it was an interesting way of kind of understanding a painful relationship that I was in the year before that, and kind of understanding grieving through that, and just kind of like knowing how to look and see what when you're in a relationship, you might highlight the positives only, and then when you look back and like reflect on it, you can see the things along the way that made sense and make like tell a new story for you, but you have to be intentional about like telling a new story to heal. So I think maybe that was something that resonated with me. But I think overall, like, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you, Jessica, that, you know, when you first watch it, I think you feel more on his side, like, oh, she's such a jerk, and blah, blah, blah. And I haven't really rewatched it from that perspective yet, from the perspective of, like, looking at Summer as pretty clearly communicating. Because, I don't know, even as you were talking about it, I'm trying to think, you know, like, I think that both of them, I mean, Summer does kind of say things pretty, you know, like, but she has this kind of, like, aloof, flowery way of saying things, too, where she's like, I'm not really looking for anything serious. But then, like, proceeds to, you know, hold hands with him and hang out with him for, like, a year or whatever. So, I don't know. Like, part of me thinks, like, there could have just overall been better communication, but what are you going to do?
Well, it's a movie, and this goes back to the point we were making about references and kind of film form to a degree. And I think that you have a lot of rom-coms that are more creative with film form, and a lot of generations kind of have their version of it. But this one, you know, it's playing with perspective, like it's coming from his perspective. So
Right.
she's sounding like that because that's how he's. And so I think that, you know, it makes references to the French New Wave, and it makes references to The Graduate and Annie Hall, and I think that makes a Bergman reference as well. Like it's kind of playing with all of this stuff, and I think that's why it connects to people, specifically people like us who are into movies, because it's kind of this light and fluffy and melancholy and funny movie, but at the same time, it also like makes these grander connections that I think resonate with people who are interested in movies.
Jessica, I'm curious, like, one movie, which I watched a lot, like, when it came out, because a lot of people, including my sister, were really into this movie, and I liked it too, but it was kind of like the, like, crest of the, like, Zooey Deschanel wave. Like, she had been in, like, movies before, but, like, her as, like, this kind of, like, indie, like, quirky it girl. Like, she was in, like she started, like, She and Him with M. Ward, like, a couple years prior, I think, and, like, then there was
an elf.
Man.
And
yeah, but in Elf, she's like kind of like a little bit different. Like,
yeah,
She's
like
blonde in Elf.
The Happening.
Yeah, but like, you know what I mean? Like the like Zooey Deschanel that like made her like the anchor of the beginning of New Girl and that sort of thing. Like that sort of like Zooey Deschanel persona. Like, and I feel like that was in my memory like a big part of this movie. And now she's like really receded from like the public eye. I'm wondering like.
Oh, she did her thing on New Girl, and she's just chilling now.
Yeah,
Man,
I mean, good for her, but,
dating.
like,
She's dating a property brother. That's what she.
oh really?
Yeah, that's what she did. I'm
It
serious.
sucks for some people.
She divorced the lead singer of Death Cab for Cutie, and
Yeah,
got with a
that was another
property
thing. She was with
brother.
the Death Cab guy. But am I making this up? You guys know what I mean? Like, there was a moment in which she was kind of like the it girl, like
Yeah.
indie kind of.
She's chilling now.
Sort of
Yeah,
thing.
for sure. It was a time where she's not supposed to be like a manic pixie dream girl, but she is still kind of like embodying like the idea of it, where she's got the bangs, and it also reminds me of like Ramona Flowers and Scott Pilgrim. Like she's got like the bangs and the like 1950s like style. And she's always like singing songs and being cute, but she doesn't really do anything else.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering. Is like, I wonder if part of this movie, and I've not seen this in years, so I couldn't say. I wonder if part of this movie's like project is to create like a person that a dude who listens to the Smiths and like the Clash and whatever, like, you know, you're kind of like, you know, alternative dude, like would you know, but instead of making it like a validating like relationship for like all your tastes, it becomes like a heartbreaking relationship. I don't know. I just think that's interesting to think about.
I definitely think there's like a stage of most people's life. Maybe it's more of a guy thing than a girl thing. I don't know. Where like liking the same bands as the person that you're with is like the most important thing in the world, right?
Yeah, I think in general, like whenever you're in high school, it's really important for you to like someone that has the same interests as you. That is something that instantly like connects you with the other person, and it's so important. And like Tom's character in this movie reminds me of myself in high school because he's so fixated on the fact that she likes the same band as him that he is like, this is the one, this is it, this has to be it, this is all
By
I
the
know.
way, are you guys aware of the fact that like there's sort of like an online Zoomer meme of like the Smiths being a shorthand for quote unquote male manipulators? Like that's
Is it
considered
because
like
of, like,
a red
Morrissey?
flag among Zoomers. If he
Yeah.
likes the Smiths, he's a male manipulator.
Is that a Morrissey thing or just like
Yeah.
No, that is definitely not a Morrissey thing. I think
Mm.
that most of
Wait
these
till they hear
kids
about
do
Morrissey.
not know who
I know.
Morrissey is. Yeah.
Is it just one of those things like, oh, he reads David Foster Wallace?
It's exact like
Uh,
X thing guys like is toxic because guys.
David
Yeah.
Foster Wallace is a good writer, and the Smiths are fun sometimes. Like let people just like things a little bit.
yeah, but there are lots of times where Tom's character is super shitty. So there's
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an
Yeah.
indicator of something for sure.
Yeah.
Before we go into a break, Jessica, how do you feel like you've evolved as a film person?
So I've evolved as a film person because I watched this movie and I was like, this is there's so many white people in this movie. Like, where are the brown people at? Like, what is going on?
Well, that's just being perceptive. I don't know if that involves as a film person. That's just,
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I've learned to appreciate all different kinds of movies, and like I know that this movie is like very heavy on the references, but there was a period of my like growth as a cinephile where whenever I first like got into cinema club, I kind of felt like I didn't belong there because I hadn't seen like any Hitchcock movies and I hadn't seen
that's a requisite.
any PTA movies, and I hadn't seen Eraserhead, and there were all these things that all of y'all were like talking about that I didn't understand, and I didn't get the reference. And so I made a list and I listed out directors, and I went and just like watched the filmography of each of those directors, and it helped me a lot in my growth as a film critic. And so I don't know, I think
in praise of gatekeeping, Jessica said.
Yeah, but it was a fake it until you make it type of thing because I kind of like didn't say a lot, so everyone just assumed that I already knew. But on the weekends I was sitting there just like cramming in like tons of movies, and then I'd show up and be like, "Hey, have you guys seen Eraserhead? Because I have."
They're like, this girl knows movies.
It was very funny. But yeah, I have learned to just like enjoy movies, and they don't have to fit in a certain box or be a certain way, as long as they kind of give you that feeling that you get after you watch a movie where you're like, I immediately want to rewatch that movie. And that
like Andrew and his mom with Prestige. Cool. All right. Well, we're going to go on a short break, and then we'll be back gatekeeping away in part 2. So stick with
How
it.
did we even get on this joke? Is it a joke?
It's a joke.
But
it's a joke.
But is it?
Fun jokes with Zach.
It's called Read the Room. It's called Context Clues.
Have we stopped part
It's
one?
called Fun
at this
Joke
point?
Yeah.
I just stopped it as soon as Zach started talking. I was like, this
All right, Zach, I got to apologize for whatever editing magic you're going to have to do when I pulled my jack out because it stopped the Audacity recording at
That
the
seems
same
like a
time.
personal problem.
Michael's just pulling his jack out on the podcast. We're on video, Michael.
We're on video now, Michael.
No.
This isn't episode 200. You can't just pull a jack out in the middle of the podcast.
I gotta go to the back.
Bringing the computer too? No, she's not bringing the computer. And now for the patrons, while Jessica's still a part of the podcast, let's review Everything Everywhere All at Once since Andrew's here. Just kidding. We're not going to do that. I don't think it would end well.
I found it a little tiring.
Did you like Swiss Army Man?
I did not like Swiss Army Man.
He did.
Dang. I thought Swiss Army Man was very funny. I'm probably going to like this movie.
You
I'm gonna say
probably will.
I stand by my comments last week that it'll make or break on the second viewing.
Probably. I never saw Swiss Army Man a second time.
Yeah. What?
My guess is break. I mean, I'm biased, I guess, but I think that like the movie has been so hyped by people. They're like,
let me tell you.
20 years from now, somebody's going to record a podcast about that movie being like a formative, life-changing experience.
Yeah. I think you're right, Zach, that people are probably overvaluing it. Sight unseen, but like people are probably overvaluing it because it's energetic and like creative.
Yeah.
And that is like a prize to be had in a theatrical experience, and
like
maybe
they
not
put forth a
later
lot
on.
of effort in that movie. No question. Everything everywhere all at once. Like every 2 seconds you're like, man, that must have taken a lot of work.
Oh, everybody's gone.
I'm still here.
Not Zach. Zach's still here. Wow, I just turned into like very 50s looking. Like,
Yeah, you got a little curl going here.
well, hi.
Well, hi there.
Well, hi. Welcome to our podcast.
It's just little old me. Just looking to be on this podcast.
This episode of Cinematary brought to you by Health Aid Pop.
Health Aid Pop.
Bubbly prebiotic soda for a healthy gut.
Gut.
Get it today at Publix near you. I love this stuff. It only has, listen, hear me out, 5 grams of sugar.
Wow.
For a fizzy, delicious beverage.
What's the Fraser?
Ginger fizz
What's
is
the
my...
Fraser? What's the flavor?
Ginger fizz is my flavor
fizz.
of choice. They also have a lemon lime. Those are the only 2 that I really drink. Andrew likes the apple. But hey, if you love soda and you love a happy gut, why not try Health Aid Pop? A bubbly prebiotic soda for a happy gut.
Are we sponsored by PBR yet?
No.
I really wish that Health Aid Pop would sponsor me and just send me free sodas.
I mean, I'm open to sponsorships from companies that are on Amazon.
Like Health Aid Pop. Just kidding, I'm being weird.
So Jarvis has discovered that he likes kombucha.
Nice.
And
He's a booch baby.
Yeah.
Baby.
Booch baby.
Jess was so quick on that. Booch baby.
He went to the doctor the other day, and he had also been like constipated, so we had him drink some prune juice or whatever.
No.
And the doctor asked him like, "Do you drink milk at home or whatever?"
I just want to see that written out.
I mostly drink prune juice and kombucha.
He told the doctor that?
Yeah.
Wow. I don't think. I feel like you're missing a vowel.
No, I said booch baby.
Oh, you
Wait,
said
what?
booch baby.
What happened?
Michael
The
said
sequel
that
to
Jarvis
Boss Baby.
likes
Booch
kombucha, and Jess was like, "Oh, he's the booch baby." Like it's a thing, and now it's a thing.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna go into the OG
Boys only
level,
zone.
the OG level.
Senior executive.
I don't actually know
Welcome to
which
the
movie
senior
Andrew
executive
picked, so
suite, everyone.
This would be fun.
Should have some really like fancy music playing behind us.
How the fuck did you have that ready instant, Andrew? Talking about fancy music playing.
I'm more like in the background of the podcast.
Welcome to the senior executive.
Dude, they just played us off the stage. They were like, get off the stage. Get off the stage.
We just do this. We just do this.
Oh
And then he's
no!
like, no.
How'd you do that, Zach? How'd you pull me out? That's so crazy.
See your arm, you dumbass. You're like, how did you do that?
All right.
The
All
attempt
right.
was made.
Let's go. Part 2.
We're just full of funny jokes because we're friends.
All right.
Part 2.
Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. And we're back with part 2 of episode 400. We're going to continue taking a trip down memory lane. Going to Andrew.
Going to me. So for my movie for episode 400, I got scooped twice. Originally, I was gonna do There Will Be Blood, and then like Michael texted me about watching There Will Be Blood for the podcast. I was like, fuck, I needed to come up with a different movie. And then I picked the movie that Zach's gonna talk about. And then like I mentioned it to Cam, I think, and he was like, oh, Zach told me he was doing that movie. It's like, fuck, what movie am I gonna do? But the final decision I came to is a fitting decision because it was like same era as all these and was very formative, I think. That movie was Fantastic Mr. Fox by Wes Anderson, which like I could have also said Coraline, but we've done an episode on Coraline. But I didn't realize that Fantastic Mr. Fox and Coraline came out the same year. That is a crazy ass year for stop motion. Yeah. But anyways, I went to go see this. I think maybe not having seen a Wes Anderson movie.
Man, we went together.
Jessy and I went to see it together. It was like the first year of us dating. And like eventually, I don't know if this was pre or post Fantastic Mr. Fox, but eventually like us going to Blockbuster and like watching kind of off the beaten path or classic movies together kind of became a thing for us, right? And so we ended up watching like all the Wes Anderson movies at one point or another, but I think this was the first one. And Wes Anderson is kind of like completes our holy trinity of directors in this episode of like, if you're in high school and you know who directors are, this is probably your favorite director, right? So Christopher Nolan, Paul Thomas Anderson, Quentin Tarantino is the one that we're not talking about, but that's a big one. And then Wes Anderson, the other Anderson, right? One of 3 plus.
Not
Andersons.
Paul W.S. Anderson.
Right. Yeah.
An important figure of his own right.
Yeah.
True.
Tell us about Wes.
But anyways, like Wes Anderson, I think is one of those directors that he hits for people of a certain age, myself included, because of how obvious the fact that there is like a filmmaking style is. Like you cannot miss that we are doing some shit with the visuals of this movie. And I think you watch a Wes Anderson movie and then you go back and watch, you know, just any old random movie that you're watching with your parents or like you're going to see because it's a new release or whatever. Just like feel like there's no effort being put in at all compared to what Wes Anderson is doing, right? And I think that in retrospect, that is kind of a juvenile view to a certain extent because like, of course, like other movies are often made as thoughtfully or require as much effort as a Wes Anderson movie. They're just not being as obvious about it, right? And Wes Anderson is like extremely obvious about it, right?
I mean, Wes Anderson has as like obvious of a style as somebody like Quentin Tarantino.
Exactly.
But it's like in a totally opposite.
I think that's why like those two are the two that really hit. I don't fully understand the Chris Nolan. I guess it's a Batman thing. Like Batman movies, we'll watch.
It's like, before Memento and Prestige. Like really they're kind of like puzzle box movies, right? Like
true. I just don't remember him having like a fandom
Prestige
when I was in high school. The way
when
that
I
he
was
does now.
As someone who was like around a bunch of like dorks in 2006 when Prestige came out, that movie was huge. Like
Inception was a big deal too, I feel like.
I guess I didn't know movie dorks in high school. I was the movie dork eventually, but it took me a while to get there.
I don't think you were a movie dork until college.
We kind of like became movie dorks together is the thing. So sweet moment on the podcast here. But
you're welcome.
Anyways, Fantastic Mr. Fox, we went to see it in theaters together. Thanksgiving. Great that this movie came out on Thanksgiving. And we're just completely blown away by it. And to this day, it remains my favorite Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah.
One thing that has kind of changed about me over the past years of being a cinephile is I have like kind of fallen out of love with Wes Anderson to a certain extent. Like I feel like I kind of outgrew his shtick, and I feel like all the movies are basically the same, and so I might as well just like grab the one that feels like it's the best one, or that like has everything I want in a Wes Anderson movie. And that's Mr. Fox. Like Darren Hughes has a review I think on Letterboxd that's like, this is the only Wes Anderson movie you need. And I agree with that. Like I think it is so good. Just like what everybody else has said about their movies. Maybe to a lesser extent, 500 Days of Summer. It seems like we're a little ambivalent on that one, but like, I think this movie really, really holds up. And like, it feels. One thing that I think is similar me now versus me then when I really responded to this movie is I do want my filmmakers to have like a sense of style of like their movies, like kind of being their own little world that you get to enter into that's not like other movie worlds, right? So, you know, a filmmaker like a kind of a highbrow filmmaker like a Pitchpong or Sethacool, like that's a movie that you turn on and like you're kind of in his world that he's created for you, right? The characters don't talk to each other in the way that people talk to each other in real life. It's like operating on its own wavelength. And Wes Anderson totally does that. And this movie totally does that. To the extent that it has like a weird sense of internal logic that's like separate from the filmmaking. Like not, there's the obvious stuff of like, there's all the colors that like the color palette is very consistent. Everything's very symmetrical. Like these characters kind of exist on this weird like 2D game space. But then there's like the way that characters talk to each other and the rules of this world. Like I made a list of like random things, like the cusses, like that nobody says cuss words. They just say the word cuss out loud. There's like this whole system of like fox years and how they translate to human years. And like when the foxes talk about how long things have been, they always specify that it's been like 2 fox years since it happened. Like this is just a logic that nobody in the movie questions. There's a thing about like Kylie's eyes. Like he will blink and out, he has like these spinny eyes and like nobody, I mean, people are a little weirded out by it, but it just feels like it's part of the internal logic of the world of this movie. Yes. And I guess another reason that young people respond to it and I respond to it is like, it is a movie that you're kind of expecting it to be a kid's movie because it's animated and it looks like other animated kids movies you've seen, but it really kind of isn't. Like, it's just kind of a Wes Anderson movie that doesn't have cuss words in it, right? Where like the characters are talking animals. Like,
my whole family watched this. We got it on like a Blockbuster Netflix or something. It was like including my like brother who was like 6 or something at the time.
Yeah. What did they think of it? Do you remember?
We all really liked it. We thought it was funny. I had no concept of who Wes Anderson was at the time, and I don't think my parents did either.
I mean, I think it's extremely crowd pleasing.
Yeah.
Like, despite the fact that it is not a traditional family movie. And it like, but you expect it to be that traditional family movie, but it's like talking about existentialism and shit. Like it is kind of adult minded in addition to just being kind of artsy in the way that it's put together. Like it kind of has one tongue in its cheek, but it is still like very much a movie about like somebody reckoning with their mortality and like their purpose in this world and the extent to which their purpose is determined by like their biological nature versus like them being able to make a decision and like create a new version of themselves just through their own free will. Like it is kind of a heavy movie in terms of like how cerebral the stuff that it's talking about is. And like the vocabulary is very like high level too. So like when you watch it, you kind of feel smart, right? Especially if you're a young person, like watching a kind of out of the ordinary movie for the first time. And you're like, oh wow, this movie makes me feel smart. I would like to, I like feeling smart. Right. So that's kind of like the self-serving, like film bro thing. Yeah.
Like, it's not, I don't know. I just remember thinking, like, me and my friends quoted silly things from it a lot. Like, if what I think is happening,
yes,
it better not be. It's like little lines like that. Or like even just the other day, well, what was it that I said? Oh, something like, I don't know what we were talking about. We were walking, and I was like, well, it better not be that, because I have a phobia.
I have a phobia of that. Another one is like, you know why I can do that? Why? Because I'm little, right? Like,
little.
there's... It's
I
an
quote once a
extremely
week.
quotable movie.
I quote once a week. There are a lot of attitudes in here.
I do. I don't even know if this is like very quotable, but I still think about it. And it's like a very useful gesture. Like he's just a little.
Different.
Oh, I
That's
do
another
that
thing
all
of
the
like
time.
the logic of the movie. Yeah, like everybody
He's
just
just a little-
knows what that means. That's how you
Oh,
say that.
And then I'll say stuff to Andrew a lot, like, I don't know. Well, like the line, I don't say this, like, do you think I'm an athlete? Because I consider myself an
I think-
athlete.
Yes,
Myself an
I
athlete.
absolutely love it.
But
Yeah.
I'd say that about like random stuff, like, do you think I'm cute? I think I'm cute, but like,
He's on the back like, what's the context?
Yeah. So, I mean, the movie's just great. Like, I don't have anything negative to say about Fantastic Mr. Fox at all.
All bangers.
It's just delightful. The attention to detail in this movie is incredible. Like, I found like little quirky gags in like small things that I had like never seen before. And I've seen this movie like 6 or 7 fucking times, right? Like, there's a scene where it's like in the downtown area where like the shootout takes place between like Bogus Bunsen Bean and like the Fantastic Mr. Fox characters. And like way in the background, there's a wall with graffiti on it, and the graffiti says "cuss." Like, it's so funny. But like that is a thing that like has kind of been lovingly painted into like every inch of this movie, like something like that. It's just really delightful.
One thing that I remember in this movie that I think is really clever, and I only noticed after I had a bunch of friends in college who liked this movie, is that the music that they listen to. At one point, they're listening to the Robin Hood soundtrack, which is of course
gosh.
and the music's really good in this movie, by the way.
It is. It's like mostly Beach Boys.
And you've not really even said anything just about the stop motion. And
Oh yeah, and like it's obvious. Honestly, like probably one of the best animated movies of all time. Like just in terms of the craft, like it's probably the best looking stop motion movie I have ever seen. I don't know if Michael and Zach have strong opinions on that.
It's
Stop
very
motion
fun.
heads, but like
No,
I mean, I think it really works as it's like a form and content synergy that's really great. Like, because it's
Yeah.
kind of hand spun, and that like works for the movie. Like something like Leica has like technically more accomplished stuff, but
yeah.
this has like just the style of the movie just fits the kind of story that it's telling so well.
It's
that-
also like it fits Wes Anderson so well.
Yeah.
right? Like this is one of the reasons why I've kind of like held on to this as like my one Wes Anderson movies, because it feels like, I mean, this is not an original thought. Everybody has said this, but like all Wes Anderson movies are like trying to look like dioramas, and this one like literally is a diorama that they have like just moved around and made animation out of, right? And you know, that unfortunately did not translate to Isle of Dogs, which people said was boring and racist. I didn't watch it. But
it is both of those things. Yeah.
but like this one is just so perfect, I think. So like I revisited it many times over the years. I always like it a lot.
Mhm.
It's just a very good time. And I don't have like a lot of profound things to say about how it changed me as a filmmaker, or as not a filmmaker, as a film watcher, or like how, you know, I've changed as a film watcher in general since then. But this movie rules. It's
I
so
think you've
good.
become more boring.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
You-
Wow.
I think Wes Anderson is an interesting touch point for the podcast, because I remember
Yeah.
we did an early episode on like some of his films. We did one on Grand Budapest. I remember
That was the first episode that was about a single movie.
Yeah, I remember.
Wow.
I remember that. I think that we started the podcast the year that Grand Budapest came out, and it was like at Downtown West for like a year.
They ate it up in downtown
Yeah.
at Downtown West. Yeah.
And I remember that. I remember going into the library at UTK and listening to this score. I think this was the first time he used Alexander Desplat as
It's
his
the
composer.
best Wes Anderson score too. That
Yeah.
duh, 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 duh,
Oh, it's fantastic.
it's so good.
I still listen to it today.
Today.
Yeah, it's great.
It's great. I don't know if you
Fantastic
have
Mr.
other,
Fox.
if you want to grill me about anything else, but
Andrew, have you ever read the
Well-
book it's based on?
I have not read the book.
It's wild because it's a Roald Dahl book, you know, but it's
Right.
like 70 pages long. It's like a trifle of a book, and all of the stuff that you're talking about that you like about this is 100% an active adaptation because the original
Well,
book is
That
like
will be an interesting thing to consider with the next movie on our list. But
It's true.
Yeah.
Jessica, were you saying something?
yeah.
Jessica, were you going to say something?
I was just gonna say that I think that this movie is interesting for us because it kind of shows you that you still have to even if we watch all of the very depressing like indie movies and the slow cinema movies, like we still should find things that we enjoy, like movies that are very comforting to watch.
yeah,
And I whenever fall rolls around, I always want to watch this movie. It's just so cozy.
it is a great comfort fall movie. And I do think that like maybe one way in which I've changed as a film viewer just in like the last couple of years is I am much more drawn to movies that are just going to like be fun than I was like I guess in your first several years of being like a hardcore cinephile, you're like I just want to watch like Bergman and Tarkovsky and shit like that. Like that's really challenging. It makes me think about my life, you know. And I like that stuff too. I really do. But like I am also now like much more in an adult part of my life where like I come home at the end of the day and I'm tired and I don't have that much time before I go to bed and I want to watch something fun, not you know Tarkovsky, who
exactly
is getting a bad rap here, but he's great. We love Tarkovsky.
I don't know.
He's on blast.
I will say as another positive thing about this movie, not really about this movie, but when I was at UT getting my graduate degree, I had to teach some freshman English courses there. And the English 102, as part of teaching that course, you have to pick, it's a research and writing course, but as part of doing it, you have to pick a research emphasis. And I chose animation. And so as part of the course, there were a few days that I just set aside for, we're going to watch movies. And I remember I showed them like a few different movies. I would bring in quizzes and they would vote on them. And I showed them Persepolis once, and they did not like that because I had them watched it in French. But
how dare you?
At the time, I
read
didn't
in a college English class.
Change the audio. I thought the DVD just came in French. But the other one that I watched was Fantastic Mr. Fox. And then I think I watched some other movie. But Fantastic Mr. Fox, I asked all the kids at the end of the year, what was the favorite movie that we watched, and it was like almost unanimous that Fantastic Mr. Fox was their favorite. So
that's awesome.
It's starting to get starting to get attention, at least on like TikTok.
Really,
with TikTok film people, they're finding this movie.
That's cool.
Kids, you never know what they're gonna discover for us.
Yeah.
Well, it's a nice change of pace from like. There's only so many like movies you gotta see. And
have you heard of Lady Bird?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, TikTok kids.
Yeah. I'm glad I wasn't on TikTok when I was like 18 or whatever, because I would have been the worst.
All right, I'm gonna bring us home since I'm the host of the podcast.
Where are we going, Zach? Where are we going?
We're gonna go where the wild things are.
My first pick. Oh no, there we go.
Your second.
But this was, I think, the one that I watched first chronologically out of all the ones that we've talked about.
Who knows?
Maybe I'm wrong about the year it came out.
Yeah,
it was 2009, I think.
It's 2009. I remember with this one, it was one where it was like, it's coming from a kid's book, but this movie isn't for kids.
Right. Like much more on its face than Fantastic Mr. Fox is, right? Like it's still colorful and fast and funny.
Yeah.
Whereas this one is like, this is sad.
It's not for kids at all.
This one has the same kind of Fantastic Mr. Fox feel of like there's the internal logic of the movie though, and that's like an important comparison.
Yeah, and it also has the Fantastic Mr. Fox quality of like like the designs of the character, like the Wild Things.
It's the fucking Henson Company.
Yeah,
did
it's
them.
it's still like so.
Yeah.
It's still like even today watching it, it's like fantastical to see like just how they design these characters and how they interact.
Can I briefly, before you give your whole Where the Wild Things Are thing, like your relationship with the movie, can I tell the story of me watching it with my family? Because this
No, it's
Zach is shrugging. Okay, I'll save it. You go ahead.
No. Talk about no. Tell how your family watched it.
I mean, it was just kind of a formative moment for me because it was the first time that I'd went to the movies with my family and they hated a movie because they thought it was too artsy, and I was like, but I really liked it though. Like, why didn't you guys like it? And that kind of like set me down that path of like, I guess I like arty movies. I should go watch some more. I should watch There Will Be Blood. Anyways, go on, Zach.
Just plunge in. No, I think this was one I remember kind of getting into. I remember getting into that stage of movies where you like in 2008 you would watch. There Will Be Blood. There was No Country for Old Men.
Mm-hmm.
There was The Dark Knight, just as like a blockbuster where it's like it's a blockbuster and it's a Batman movie, but it could be more, and things like that. And this one, I think I linked heavily on it being people kind of one. It is a super because it's so dark and very like firmly entrenched in what it wants to do. I think it turns a lot of people off. It's very melancholy. It's very it's kind of a gray movie. It is a super sad movie. Still think it's a very good movie though.
Sad in a way that, like you said, is upsetting for some people, right? Like I remember when the movie came out, the thing that I kept hearing about the movie was like, this movie ruined my childhood.
Yeah, because it taps into like this.
Didn't Maurice Sendak like it?
Oh yeah.
It taps into like this kind of childhood sadness of just, you think about the kind of your first introduction to Max, and he is creating this this igloo fort thing, and his sister is there, and she's kind of ignoring him. And then her friends come over and they have like this whole moment where it's, a lot of the introduction to Max as a character is kind of how he just wants to have that childlike sense of wonder and play. And then kind of working off the people in his life who have that to a degree, but also like have their own internal lives that they're living that don't necessarily overlap with he's 100% play and they're like 20% play and then 80% real life, and like there's just kind of this sadness that you capture at the beginning where his sister and her friends come and play with him and they're all having a good time, and then the one friend jumps on top of the igloo and like brings it down and everybody's leaving, and Max is crying and they just kind of leave him where this whole little mini world that he created, this kind of sadness of seeing, your fort destroyed. And then
he also like sits in a classroom and learns about the heat death of the universe.
but then you get to like the Wild Thing world, and Spike Jonze is able to kind of just really able to create this very tangible, fantastical world. And you have all of these different characters that are fitting his different, it's a movie about a kid coming to terms with the different deficiencies and different things about his personality that are imperfect but still make him who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, all inform who he is as a person. And this is a kid's movie, and like I think on that level it's still really impactful. And I think it's a movie that, because it's doing all that stuff and not about the children's book that it's based off of, I think that kind of resonated. And I was thinking about it, and mainly the reason I wanted to do it as well is it reminds me about a lot of a lot of the movies, specifically like A24 movies that are coming out today, and
This would totally be an A24 movie. It came out today.
1,000%.
Yeah.
But like the A24 movies that are coming out today, like you think about stuff like Hereditary or Midsommar or The Green Knight or things like that, where it's these movies that are a little bit off the path of mainstream movie fare. That's why people kind of react to those movies.
Hereditary is going to be on this list for like a next generation 100%.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, I think that that's, the thing that made me think about doing this specific type of movie for this episode or just as a series was, I think that regardless, I was going to be kind of curious if people watched movies that they enjoyed, but that, back 7-8 years ago, and then we're kind of like, oh, this movie sucks.
Yeah.
Not because I necessarily think that these movies that I mentioned, like Hereditary, are going to do that, but I think that after 7 years, you do develop this different sense of movies, and movies like that
have
are
a bigger sense of like scope of like what you're comparing it to. Right?
Yeah, and it's not that those movies are bad, but I think that a lot of younger people react to them just because it's so different from, they're growing up going to the movie theaters, and it's mainly like Marvel movies, and it's mainly things like that, and these are things that are so stark and different that are engaging with these cinematic forms that, like, kind of like we're talking about with Fantastic Mr. Fox and There Will Be Blood and 500 Days of Summer, and I think that's important in developing that critical mind with movie watching, because I think you have to watch movies like Where the Wild Things Are that you're like, holy fucking shit, this is like completely different. Nobody's talking about this.
And it's kind of a genius move to make it that movie too, like to make an adaptation of Where the Wild Things Are to be a movie like that, because it's a property that like families know. It is like getting families in the door who are expecting the first type of movie.
I remember going to see this in a theater, and there were like families, like mom and kids in it, because they assumed that this was the book, like Where the Wild Things Are.
Yeah. No, we're just going to be very sad for a very long time.
We're just going to be really sad, and we're going to have a lot of stuff that we're going to discuss.
Yeah.
But I think also, like, it does earn, like, it's melancholy, but man, it like I was like watching it, and like James Gandolfini's performance is so fucking good. Just like because most of them are like, I was thinking about him. I was thinking about how good Catherine O'Hara is always as like a voice actor. Like people think about her in like Beetlejuice, like Tim Burton movies or Christopher Guest movies as like this, or now more recently like Schitt's Creek, of like this kind of vivacious personality. But like you also think about like her voice work. Her voice work's so good. Like even you have something that's very like subdued and soft, like Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas, and then you have something like this movie where everything she says just is like has like this sinister. Like it's like she's frightening a lot of the movie, just in the way that she delivers lines.
The wild things are scary.
They are really
incredibly
weird and
scary.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of like this scariness of like it's not hereditary scary. It's like this just kind of like uneasy, kind of frightening. These uneasy, frightening characters that are because it's tapping into like these personality traits of this undeveloped, child's mind. Like they're just a little unhinged, and so you don't really know what direction they're going to go, and that's what kind of makes it frightening. And there's
also like some really kind of strange stuff in the designs as well. Like there's the moment where like Max has to crawl inside the belly of one of them, and then like one of the other ones like gets his arm ripped off, and it's like just full of sawdust and stuff. And it's really It reminds me of dreams like that I would have as a little kid, where like textural details that I knew from real life were put in places I didn't expect them to be. And I like that. It's really cool.
And I think that's where it connected with me on how I watch movies now, because like I think then I definitely was more engaged with movie culture. very unengaged with movie culture now. I literally didn't watch the Oscars this year.
Yeah, you
And-
had a film blog before Cinematary was a thing.
I did.
Right?
And like I because I thought that like you had like that's how you had to engage with movies. And now I like engaging with movies that are kind of like what we were talking about with Fantastic Mr. Fox and Wes Anderson. Like I don't want them. I don't really want a lot of reality, you know. Like they're supposed like they were literally invented as like these dream escapes. You know, you could go
Yeah.
you can go as far back as like the Méliès brothers and things in the Lumiere and things like that. Like they were just these fantastical dreams that made absolutely no sense most of the time. And that's kind of my creed now with any movie. Like I don't want it to make any sense. Like we were talking about Christopher Nolan earlier, and if you watch Tenet, that movie makes no goddamn sense, but it's so much fun because it kind of goes, I don't make any sense. I don't give a shit that you don't understand anything that's going on. Fuck you. I'm gonna just make no sense. Like it's aggressive in how it makes it, but I love that. And
Have you watched much Argento that's not Suspiria, Zach?
No, I feel like
that shit makes no sense.
I feel like I need to dive into that. I feel like I need to dive into. I guess my cinema blind spot is I've not seen that much David Lynch, which is
you should do that. But his movies do make sense in a really roundabout way. Like
David Lynch is another movie guy
It
that we
makes
could have
sense to
listed in this
David.
as like
You have to
important.
figure it out.
Like I think something that like makes David Lynch another kind of like Tarantino, Paul Thomas Anderson type figure is that they have the feeling of being really esoteric, but usually there's some sort of underlying logic that you can parse out if you try hard enough.
Yes.
And I think that makes him really appealing to like budding film people.
But and my final point about mainly is that it's good to have these movies that at least flicker the light of like interest in kind of thinking about movies more a step above just being like entertainment vessels that enter your face.
Right.
Like I think that even if 7-8 years from now, the people who you're like, my favorite movie is Hereditary, or my favorite movie is The Green Knight, or something like that.
Yeah.
It probably is not going to be your favorite movie in 7-8 years because it's not supposed to be, but it will still be a movie that what the important thing that it did was that it flicked that light on that kind of went, I want to think about movies in an engaged way. And I think that's the overall point of this episode.
I called Where the Wild Things Are my favorite movie for a really long time. It was the first movie that I showed at Cinema Club.
Oh,
he
wow.
made posters for it.
I did.
I think there's a lot of contempt among certain people for the kind of movie that you're talking about, Zach, because like in the same way that like, you get into like heavier kind of music and you're like, well, I don't like Coldplay anymore because I like Radiohead now or whatever. Like that's a bad example, but you know what I mean? Like there's a kind of feeling of like, I think people, and myself included, like have a tendency to like remember the worst characteristics of themselves, like finding these movies and like see like a lot of the obnoxious fandoms or whatever that can surround these movies. Which are like legitimately obnoxious sometimes, but also like those stepping stones are important and they captivate people for a reason. And I think there's like I don't know, it's a weird phenomenon of like self-loathing that like people become so disdainful of like the I don't know what, like Christopher Nolan's and
they want to feel like they're above
Jones's.
their self.
And that's the advice I would offer is like, you don't want, because I think you can you start getting interested and you go like you dive like head first and then you become obnoxious because you're just like, because you're just like, oh, that's the, and I think that's what's been interesting since the podcast has started, because I think I was on one level, I got more into different stuff, dove in a little bit, but I've at least come out now where it's like there's like I think we all can go, there's a little bit of both sides that we can kind of dive into, and that's the happy medium you want to get to is you can appreciate something that's not quote unquote this high art movie that you're supposed to watch, but then you can also enjoy that too. Like you can kind of find
in one of the first years of the podcast, I think a big deal was like me and Jessy talking about really liking Magic Mike XXL, right? Like that was an unexpected thing because it's not like the high art movie that we have a podcast about.
It's dope.
But I think like
It's so good.
growing up and getting like becoming more exposed to movies like tends to mean that you develop like an actual taste, and with that taste it doesn't mean that you only like movies above a certain level of fanciness. It means that you can like identify the goodness or badness of a movie on anywhere on the scale,
And
right?
I think like I think it just it helps you pick up on like when things are done well, even when those things are mainstream. Like think about how much we love Legally Blonde.
Absolutely.
And that's
Yeah.
like, think about one of the like everybody's heard of this silly frou-frou girly movie, but it's so fucking good.
Yeah.
And we can like talk about it for a whole podcast because it's great. I think it just you become aware of what makes movies good.
Yeah.
Look for it. You find it. When you know, you know.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, the point is to be engaged in that thought process. It's not so that there's not a right or wrong answer.
And I don't mean to imply that like some movies just are or are not good, and only movie fans can identify which ones are which. But like, everyone's no.
Well, no, that's
you should just be thinking about it. And like,
but that's you mentioned we talked about Christopher Nolan, and that's the kind of thing with him that's kind of annoying is the puzzle box movie. It's like I have to like it's like a engaged activity, and people like doing that. And if you like doing that, that's fine. But like everything is not a like there's not like a thing at the end. It's not like a video game where it's like you've completed the movie, you've figured it out.
You clever thing.
Ending explained. Yeah.
Exactly. And so my thing is kind of like if you're somebody younger who's listening and you are like, this movie is my favorite movie, that's awesome. Like use that as a jumping off point to explore other things and kind of move around, and then
and a lot of the movies that are like the Zoomers' favorite movies are really fucking good movies too. Like
Romeo and Juliet.
Well, let's ignore those people. I know we currently have a wave of Romeo and Juliet associated listeners because there was a TikTok that went viral about that episode. But like in general, the movies that like the TikTok teens, if I can speak with any authority on them, are interested in are like the A24 movies, right? And it's Lady Bird, it's A Ghost Story, it's like Parasite, that kind of thing.
It's current Everything Everywhere All at Once is
everywhere. Yeah.
And I think again, like I hope that it's just my hope is just that you can still like those movies, but then use it as a jumping off point to also explore other things. I get the reason I get discouraged on like looking at like the TikTok people is if they're just kind of recycling the same things. Like I think you can go into different realms but still enjoy Lady Bird and still enjoy Parasite and things like that, but then use that to realize that these like movies are always in conversation with stuff that came before. Like it's kind of silly when you get into this whole this is a purely original movie, this is incredible, and you're like no, there's no such thing as a purely original movie nowadays, and there's no that's completely fine, because that's the whole point of any art form, is that it's working off what came before and either adding to it or bouncing off of that or rejecting that in some way,
And everybody's doing the stealing thing that I was kind of talking about in part one disparagingly, but that is just kind of part of the conversation, the ongoing conversation, right?
Yeah, well, because I hear it from not just young people, but like older movie fans as well. Like it's just like, oh, this isn't original. It's like, well, yeah, nothing's fucking original, like. I mean, even at the beginning of movies, they were stealing from.
They were adapting books. Yeah.
They were stealing from books and plays. Plays were stealing from literature. Literature was stealing from people who just literally spoke the stories out. Like there's no originality. So I mean, challenge yourself to use this as a stepping stone to kind of challenge yourself and find out what you're into, because now I'm watching fucking a pitch upon where ethical movies. That's what that's where we're at. So with that,
we're digging into some Greg Araki next week.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm so excited.
Everybody say goodbye to Jessica because this is the end.
Oh my gosh, she's not. She left. She's
gone. She's gone forever.
That's a stinker.
Just has an ejector seat in Jessica's apartment.
No, I joke that we're gonna recast her. So like next week, there's gonna be somebody like in a black wig that's just gonna be like, "Yeah, I'm Jessica."
I'll be Jessica. I was Jessica a couple weeks ago. I could be Jessica again.
She didn't find that very funny.
Reprising your role.
That's why Jessica's Jessica and I'm Jess.
All right, well that'll wrap up this episode 400 of Cinematary.
Did you already do the pitch for the Greg Araki series?
Did not.
Are we
We're
gonna
not-
talk
we're getting
about
to
it?
He's getting into it.
We're getting that, so just like be quiet.
There's a routine.
No, this is part of it.
Um,
Is this where I say stay cool?
no,
Oh man.
it's where you just let me.
Yeah, somebody's messing with the timeline.
Nobody listening to this understands the stay cool joke because he always edits it out.
Sometimes he doesn't.
If you'd like to learn more about Cinematary, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd, letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. If you'd like to support the podcast, and if you want to give us $1 and then make us watch Romeo and Juliet 2, please don't.
Please don't.
You can go to patreon.com.
I believe it's called Sherlock Gnome.
I think you have to
Don't
do
encourage him.
$5. I think $5 is the movie pick
For at least
tier.
6 months, and then
For at least 6 months. Thank you to Cam,
I don't know
Chad
when we're gonna be able to
Newsom,
make in.
Corey
so-
Willingham, Candace and Ron Hayes, Teresa Masathi, Titus Arthur, Tyler Chandler, Whitney Rio Ross. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week, we're going to be kicking off a director series on director Greg Araki. We'll head over to cinematary.com to see the schedule. We're going to make you go to the website. So go to cinematary.com to see the schedule for that. But until next week.
Stay cool.
All right, we got to go because Jessica's over here yawning like a fucking crazy person.
It's pretty late.
Oh my gosh.
I'm